If you're a student of film, and more specifically film history, then there are quite a few names that you have no doubt studied. Sergei Eisenstein, Lev Kuleshov, Cecil B. DeMille, F.W. Murnau, way too many names to list. All giants within their own right that form the foundation for future filmmakers to build upon. But if you're a student of anime history, then there's really only one name that keeps cropping up. Osamu Tezuka. Oh sure, there were plenty of other people that formed the tropes and mechanics that inform what we typify as anime, but no other person is as vital to anime as Tezuka is. His list of contributions are almost ridiculous when you lay it out as mere fact. Created his first manga when he was 17, published Shin Takarajima, the manga that many point to as the beginning of Japan's own version of America's golden age of comics in 1947, presided over his own animation studio, Mushi Production, in 1963, pioneering the anime industry in its budget-conscious nature, and let's not forget, creating the visual tropes by which many of us identify as anime. Yeah, you know the stereotype of anime? Big eyes, small mouths? That was created by Osamu Tezuka, who was inspired by Walt Disney cartoons in the 1930s and 40s. Moreover, the man is also a fascinating individual, even viewed outside of his historical importance. He was inspired to pursue medicine after being treated for a childhood sickness and even earned his medical degree at Osaka University, but he wound up never practicing, instead becoming a manga artist full-time. He would later use his knowledge when he created one of his most famous manga, Blackjack. Aside from his prolific output, having penned something to the tune of over 700 manga during his lifetime, Tezuka was known for his dedication to his work. He was offered by Stanley Kubrick to be his art director on his then upcoming film, 2001, A Space Odyssey, but turned it down because it would mean being away from his studio for a year. He wound up loving the film regardless, and would play the soundtrack late at night to keep him motivated during long hours. Sadly, Tezuka died in 1989 of stomach cancer. Reportedly, a nurse tried to take away his drawing tools, leading him to say his last words, "I'm begging you, let me work." We can only hope to be half as dedicated as Tezuka was, so it's little wonder that we still see adaptations of his work even decades after his death. Which brings us to today's subject, Metropolis. Based off one of Tezuka's earliest works, the story behind the making of Metropolis is a weird amalgamation of chance and serendipity. Under pressure from his editors, Tezuka created it to help stymie the reputation of comics being junk entertainment, and wrote it to be an actual book. Which, to me, sounds like the very first recorded case of the overly defensive statement, "It's not a comic book, it's a graphic novel." Despite never having seen Fritz Lang's film in the same name, Tezuka drew inspiration from Metropolis through a promotional image of the iconic Maria. He ran with the idea of a humanoid robot in a major class-struggling city and created the standalone comic in 1949. Tezuka would later revisit the idea put forth in the story when he created his most famous and endearing manga, Mighty Atom. That's Astro Boy to you and me. Despite its importance at the time, to create a film adaptation of the manga over 50 years after the fact can only be described as a passion project, and befitting such a moniker, the film boasts a development team of top-tier talent, including Rintaro as director and Katsuhiro Otomo as writer. The film even garnered a major US release, having been one of the very few selected titles to be brought stateside by Columbia Pictures. So what we got here is a film adaptation from anime's most beloved figure, made by titans of the industry, and given all the funding and attention that any anime could ask for. We have the makings of a stone-cold classic here, right? We begin with a grand gala celebrating the completion of Metropolis' latest architectural marvel, the ziggurat. Spirits seem to be on high, even though rumblings of the dissatisfied working class creep their way into the upper class's cocktail conversations. The room suddenly is abuzz with activity as the president of Metropolis and business tycoon Duke Red make their entrance. Seems to be the perfect time for some ham-fisted villainous foreshadowing.
Duke Red, now that the ziggurat's complete, will you be going into politics next?
Don't be ridiculous. As long as President Boone here is in charge, our state is secure. I'm just a private citizen. Politics has no need of me, I assure you.
Ah, come on. Duke Phillips was more subtle in his bid for power.
I say gaze into the hypnotic power of my evil eye.
While the festivities are going on, a wayward robot attempts to, shine some light on the mistreatment of its kind, but is gunned down by the head of the vigilante group, the Mardukes.
I put you in charge of security to prevent that kind of thing.
Yes, Father.
You idiot! I'm not your father, understand? I found you during the last war. You were an orphan, so I took you in.
And I'm telling you this because, the audience needs to know this information. Also, if you have such a hostile attitude towards your adopted son, why the fuck did you adopt him in the first place? For the tax breaks? Ugh! So it seems that Duke Phillips here has some other pies he's got his fingers in, hiring a Dr. Loughton here for some kind of project, of which the doctor is late on. He better hurry and finish it too, because he's a wanted man for trafficking organs, and he's being pursued by P.I. Shinsaku Ban and his nephew Kenichi.
That's why I'm asking for your cooperation in this investigation, Superintendent. I've never been to Metropolis before, and frankly, I can't tell which way is which half the time.
So, Ban is a P.I. who is traveling outside of his own country to pursue a worldwide wanted criminal with a child. Okay. He's not a part of any kind of international police or anything. He was just hired by some unnamed private party to apprehend Dr. Loughton and extradite him somewhere, which I don't think private investigators can legally do. Also, why the hell is he bringing his nephew along in this obviously dangerous job? I mean, sure, Kenichi is supposed to be the main protagonist, well, at least arguably, as you'll soon find out, but without a believable reason why he had to travel outside of the country, he's just there because... reasons. Since the entire precinct is swamped with keeping the peace during the unveiling of the ziggurat, Ban is provided with his own robot escort through the city. Jesus, another robot in a trench coat? This is becoming more of a repetitive trope than the Japanese priestess cliché. If there is one strength to the film, though, it's its fantastic design and world building. Several times the movie cuts away from the immediacy of the plot to paint the setting with the sounds and feelings of its own world. As far as visual storytelling is concerned, it does a truly commendable job in capturing the mood and sometimes wonder a fantastical city like this should elicit. But even here, it does tend to go overboard, especially in the, shall we say, Godwin side of things. Let's see, 1930s aesthetic, subjugated and vilified class, jackbooted thugs that answers to a frenzied and fiery orator. Next you're gonna tell me that they pipe in propaganda proclaiming that the government will last 1,000 years, and cue clip.
Metropolis is the world leader in industry, economics, and culture. Thus is born an ascendant state that will last 1,000 years.
I've said it once, I'll say it again. There's a reason why it's called Godwin's Law. Anywho, the three begin their search for Dr. Loughton in the city's underbelly.
This level is not dangerous per se, but there are areas, certain districts, where we police have little authority. We're going into one now, so be aware of your surroundings and watch your backs.
Ah yes, perfect place to bring a child! And speaking of, seems Dr. Loughton is almost done putting the finishing touches on a robot child for Duke Phillips here, but he's starting to have second thoughts.
I'm not giving you to anyone. Nah, not a chance. I'll put the finishing touches on now. Then we'll escape together and leave Metropolis far behind.
Here is where the movie begins to fall apart for me. Why in the world does Dr. Loughton want to keep this gynoid? It's a simple question, movie. Why does he want to keep her? Well, any answer you could come up with at home, folks, might as well be the right answer because the film is about to render this whole exercise entirely moot.
I know you, you're Rock. How did you find my laboratory?
Wait, Duke Phillips's adopted son is named Rock? No, coincidence. Since Hudson here has a murder boner for robots, the guy just kills Dr. Loughton and sets his laboratory on fire. See? Told you it was pointless. In fact, that's pretty much the character down to a T. Pointless. Actually, he's worse than pointless. He's entirely detrimental to the story. Again, excuse me for jumping off the plot rails here, but this needs to be said. Hudson wasn't a part of the original manga. He was, in fact, a regular character that would pop in Tezuka's many manga, a habit of which Tezuka more than dabbled in. So why is he here? Well, to give a more felt antagonistic presence in the story, surely. But by doing so, he creates this jarring character dynamic that completely uproots the story. We already know that his father hates him, for some reason, even though he was the one who adopted him. And if that weren't dissonant enough, Hudson is bending over backwards to try and earn his father's love, even though he has never shown anything but disdain for him. this might have been smoothed out if we had seen some kind of past interaction between the two as to why he adopted him and why Hudson's so determined to earn his daddy's love, but all we ever get is that throwaway exposition line about how he adopted him after some war we never see or hear about again. Excuse me if I'm not immediately invested in that vague, barely put together backstory movie. There's just so much wrong here. While Hudson makes tracks, there's still a fire to deal with, which gives Otomo the perfect opportunity to scratch his writhing wire itch. Oh god, this is like if Otomo directed the hot chocolate sequence in Polar Express.
Hey, see if you can get in from the back.
Okay.
Hurry, and be careful.
Yes, small child, be sure to look both ways before crossing the street to go inside a burning building! Hello? Bond is too late to save Lawton, but he points to a journal for Bond to keep. And just so we aren't confused as to what Lawton was pointing to, the film literally iris wipes to hone in on the journal. In fact, this isn't the only time the movie does this. Earlier, Bond, Kenichi, and Nick Valentine encounter the Marduk's needlessly destructive pursuit of a robot out of its designated area, and it iris wipes out into the same scene again just some time later. That's not how wipes work! They're supposed to be used to transition between the end of a scene and the beginning of a new one! How do you fuck up a wipe? Like I said, so much wrong. Kenichi is separated from his uncle after he happens upon the very much alive gynoid that Lawton built. Meanwhile, Bond and Nick Valentine here ruminate on the painfully obvious.
He's Duke Red's right-hand man.
Really? Duke Red? Is he part of this Marduk thing? What does he want with a bunch of thugs?
Duke Red founded the Marduk Party. It's his group. Of course, there are no official ties, nothing traceable. But he puts up the money for all of their operations.
The fuck are you talking about? If Duke Phillips is funding the Marduk's operations, then there is a connection between the Mardukes and Duke Phillips, you dense bucket of bolts! We finally catch up with Kenichi trying to communicate with the gynoid Tima. The scenes themselves are supposed to come off as sweet and endearing, I suppose, but they're just mostly awkward.
That's how you eat it. Oh no, don't eat that. You're only supposed to eat fresh food. Rotten food can make you sick.
No, don't eat. Make you sick.
Riveting? And speaking of confusing and awkward, remember that ziggurat at the beginning of the movie? Well, turns out it's a doomsday device that creates sunspots that ravages all nearby electronics. Oh, I mean, only robots. Because science. Why does Duke Phillips turn it on right now, I hear you ask? Well, the characters say that they're testing the effects, but considering how much damage it causes and how wide-ranging the effects are, I don't see how Duke can keep this under wraps. Really, this is just a transparent display to show the audience that this means business. But what really kills me is that the movie treats the president and the government as the bad guys in this situation.
All right, so we'll leak stories to the press. That'll turn the focus of the public on Duke Red. And when there's enough resentment built up against him, we'll arrest him for treason. If that requires the military, you have my approval. Understood?
But he is committing treason. And why do you have to leak anything to the press? He just microwaved Metropolis for everyone to see. How do you miss that? I suppose they're just taking advantage of Duke's weapon to shift focus off themselves, since it's stated that they're dealing with a rebellion, because apparently this movie doesn't have enough goddamn plot lines going, so might as well throw in a revolution while they're at it. Which actually leads me to a very important question. What is the point of focus in this movie? At first it seems that we should be focusing on Bond trying to nab Dr. Lawton, but he's dead, so that goes out the window. It might be that the relationship between Tima and Kenichi is what we should be focusing on, but we've only had one scene with them in nearly 40 minutes of runtime. In fact, so far, there's more time devoted to Hudson and Duke Phillips' strained part of a relationship than Tima's and Kenichi's, and we already covered how much those two don't make a lick of sense. Then there's the political strife that seems to be happening around the city, but because we know nothing about it, save for that the working class's livelihood feels threatened by robot replacement, there's nothing to get invested in. Suffice it all to say, pick a story and stick with it! So Hudson figures that Tima and Kenichi are still alive and finds them in the lower levels. What transpires is a solid 7-minute chase scene that, while very beautifully animated and action-packed, still doesn't really further any kind of narrative. It just means that now the story proper could get started, nearly 50 minutes into the movie. And even then, the story can't make up its mind about what in the hell is going on. I swear what I'm telling you is true. Hudson loses them in a garbage heap, Tima accidentally turns on a radio that alerts one of his guards, he investigates, and they're nowhere to be seen. Cut immediately to the leader of the rebels bringing the two with him, with no explanation of how either of them got out of that hole, or how he found them.
Hey Atlas, everyone's been waiting for your signal. Not today, there are Mardukes everywhere.
Oh, and he's named Atlas too, because Atlas Shrugged is a thing. Even though John Galt would be on Duke Phillips' side and not the rebels, but fuck it. Jeez, he's even got Che Guevara posters in his house. Why the fuck are you even here, asshole? Oh, and hi, obvious symbolic imagery. Thought you'd never show up. You know, Metropolis is one of those kinds of movies that, even when things are going on, nothing's going on. Case in point right here. Atlas talks about toppling down the ziggurat, literally bringing up the Tower of Babel while doing so, cut to them marching up to the gates, killing Nick Valentine in the process, only for the military to betray the president to align themselves with Duke Phillips, and the revolution fails. Off screen. Oh, and the president's aide has a candle over his head as he dies. For some reason.
How can humans so easily destroy robots, Kenichi?
They call this a revolution?
I know, right? This fucking sucks! And for the last goddamn time, what is the story? So now that we've done away with Dr. Lawton, Nick Valentine, the President, and the rebels, can we get to the meat of the plot now? If there is one?
You're safe, thank goodness. I thought I'd never see you again.
Thought you'd never see him again? Or hoped you never see him again? Because you did your goddamnedest to make sure that kid wound up dead, asshole. Introductions are barely made between Bond and Tima when Duke Phillips basically pimps in and abducts her, stripping Hudson of his title and banishing him for lying about Tima's fate. The whole setup is the very definition of forced, as all parties just seem to find each other within fucking minutes. An hour into the movie, and the plot is still just meandering along. Fucking Mr. Magoo has a better sense of direction. And it just keeps on going as Hudson tricks Tima into leaving Duke Phillips and abducts her himself before Bond comes in and saves the day. And hey, remember that journal that the film painstakingly made sure we didn't miss? Well, guess what? It reveals that Tima was built by Lawton on the behest of Duke Phillips to look like his dead daughter. A fine bit of pathos for a character bereft of any kind of sympathy, or at least it would be if we didn't know this already.
Duke Red doesn't have any children, everyone knows that. He had a daughter, but she died when she was very young.
So you mean to tell me that Duke Phillips had Dr. Lawton build a robot to look like his dead daughter to helm a doomsday weapon that he also built? This should be hitting harder than it is. And the reason why it has all the impact of a spitball is because the film doesn't focus on it at all. We only see Duke Phillips holding a framed picture of his daughter once, and that's it. Otherwise, he's a tyrannical prick that is looking to conquer the world by frying robots with sunspots. Hell, even if the movie did focus and develop it more, it still wouldn't be effective because of her purpose involving the ziggurat, which blows the kneecaps off any kind of semblance of coherency. Fuck, why does he even need her for the ziggurat anyway? He's clearly shown that he can operate the weapon without her, so why did he need her to operate it in the first place? It all comes to a head when Tima finds out that she's a robot and manages to track where Kenichi is, who's been abducted by, you guessed it, Duke Phillips.
Vote for Duke! Vote for Duke! Vote for Duke!
Sorry, I just needed that. Tima and Bond are recaptured again, this time both being brought to the very chair of the ziggurat. Distraught with having learned her true purpose of being a weapon, Tima goes crazy and causes all the robots to defect and wreak havoc on Metropolis. Because she has that power now, I guess. This all leads to the mother of all anime Peckinpah endings. An enthralled Tima corners Kenichi on top of the ziggurat, and Duke, Phillips, and Hudson are cornered by crazed robots.
Rock!
I can't stop loving you. I've made up my mind.
An ironic use of 60s music. Never thought I'd see the day that anime would rip off Scorsese, but can't say it's not effective. I mean, the lead up to the finale has been a twisted helix of misaligned plot lines and inconsequential bullshit, but the last 10 minutes are easily the best in the entire film, not only because of its impressive animation, but because for the first time there is clear character motivation and emotion. Kenichi is trying to get through to Tima, and tries to save her when she dangles precariously off a ledge.
Who am I?
Said I made up my mind.
And he doesn't. So, how does it end? Rather happily, actually, considering that robots just went berserk and killed scores of people after a bloody revolution led to a military dictatorship that overthrew their president. Bond goes back to Japan and Kenichi stays in Metropolis, for some reason. And it just ends. I don't get it. If Kenichi and Tima were the emotional core of the movie, why do they have to sit backseat to the go-nowhere politics of the city and the revolution that might as well be a literal damp squib? But the question I find myself asking at the end of all of this is, what was the point? There are so many different characters, each seemingly having a felt importance to where you think the story is going, only for the movie to pull the rug out from everyone's feet and juke a different direction. Honestly, what happened in the film? Kenichi goes with his uncle out of the country to pursue a criminal, and he befriends a girl who's a robot. She winds up dying, so he stays in the city. That's it. That's the story. Everything else, the revolution, the corruption, the robots, just flotsam that adds up to nothing. If you ask me to summarize what is wrong with Metropolis in one scene, it's when Kenichi and Tima, our supposed main characters, are just puttering around the remains of the revolution. That exchange between Tima and Kenichi really strikes at the heart of the main problem with Metropolis, the themes of humans destroying their own creations and the senseless violence caused by revolution. Two ideas that are butting heads against each other, jockeying for attention in the film. They don't mesh to create a cohesive whole narrative, they tear at each other and cause the focus to erratically shift between them. To call this frustrating would be underselling the very concept of the word. Sure, it's wonderfully animated and scored, but without a cohesive story to tell, let alone a compelling one, then it's just pretty and that's it. This is the movie equivalent of having William Shakespeare using his most eloquent of prose to tell a limerick. Fuck. Ugh. What a way to start 2017, huh? How about we turn things down a notch and just look at some everyday violent schlock for a change? Till next time.
Long live your Lord High Regent Sage! Long live Benetopia!